Well, good morning, Shabbat Shalom, and welcome. I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein. This is Torah study for a Shabbos Hanukkah, and I'm joined this morning by my friend, the Grinch.
The Grinch. Boy, am I the
The
Hanukkah
Grinch who steals Hanukkah. Rabbi Mark Gelman of South Florida. Rabbi Gelman, today, he and I are going to debate Hanukkah. I happen to think this holiday has a great deal to teach us and has a great deal of wonder and joy. Rabbi Gelman, of course, is an enemy of joy and an opponent of wonder and wishes to stomp all those things out of the Jewish people.
Down with Hanukkah. Down with Hanukkah.
Oh, nebuch. So, Shabbos Hanukkah. We're going to be reading the Joseph story, of course, in the Torah, but we're going to spend our time today talking about Shabbos Hanukkah. First of all, I think that given the darkness that surrounds us since October 7th, I think a holiday which demands that we light a little bit of light each night for 8 nights, gather together with the people we love, our community, our families, and our friends, eat some latkes and sufganiyot, and celebrate.
Tell them what that is. There are people who don't know.
Latkes are awfully greasy potato pancakes, and sufganiyot are awfully greasy jelly donuts. Don't ask. Don't ask. The fact that we...
Well, why? Let's fill that in. Why are latkes part of Hanukkah, and why are jelly donuts part of Hanukkah?
Go ahead, because you can eat 8 nights of oil in one sitting. That's
exactly right. It's an oil holiday. It's a holiday celebrating oil.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment, because I think
how can
that's
you have
part
a holiday
of why
that celebrates oil. Please. Plus, it's up against the best Christian holiday in the universe.
Yes.
Christmas with Santa and twinkling lights on the trees and the Hallelujah chorus of Handel's Messiah. And what are we throwing up against that? What's our ammunition to save Jewish kids from being lonely and having Christmas envy? What are we doing? We're giving them, I had a little dreidel, I made it out of clay. That's our most sophisticated song. And what are we doing? The worst. The reason that this is a completely degenerate holiday, leave aside the consumerism, which would be enough to argue that we should get rid of Hanukkah, because it's just about maxing out your credit cards. But the fact of the matter is, it's a celebration of Jewish fascism. These Maccabees were Jewish fascists. These were people that we can see echoes of in our own time. These were people who started their rebellion against the Seleucid Greeks by killing Jews who happened to be studying Greek philosophy. Some of them may have worshipped Greek god idols. That was not good, but the point is that after the conquest of Alexander the Great, in 331, Judaism was formed by the people who listened to Greek philosophy and listened to what they had to say and listened to Aristotle and Plato. And they were already reforming a Judaism that could endure in the diaspora, and that didn't require the temple, and that didn't require priests, and that didn't require the sacrifice of animals, all of which were disgusting and terrible and had retarded Judaism, and to the point where in 167, according to Josephus, Judaism was one of the smaller minor religions of 20 religions, 20, that were active in Judea at that time. So what you had is a group of fascist priests who wanted to preserve the Judaism of animal worship, and whose descendants, called the Hasmonean dynasty, were so corrupt that by the time the Romans came along in the year 70 to destroy the temple, they didn't even have to shoot an arrow, because the Jews were happy to have anyone overcome the Hasmoneans and get rid of them. They were auctioning off the high priesthood. Salome Alexander and Jason and the rest. Terrible, terrible people. So we're celebrating the wrong people. The story of Hanukkah wisely was not included in the Hebrew Bible. Purim, which has some ethical issues in it, is in there. Hanukkah's not in the Bible. Hanukkah's not in the Tanakh. And we don't even know what the miracle was. The rabbis in the Talmud say, Hanukkah Ma'i. What is it? What is this Hanukkah? Is it the miracle of the oil? Was it the miracle of defeating the Seleucid Greeks and rededicating the temple? So there's nothing worthy about this holiday. And the only reason it has survived is Christmas, because it's our counterattack on Christmas. I've heard kids in my synagogue over 44 years when I was there say to me, Rabbi, we like Hanukkah because we tell our friends we get 8 nights of presents, and on Christmas, they only get 1 night of presents. How sick is this? How sick? This is our spiritual counterattack? No, I'm sorry. There's just nothing worthy about Hanukkah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ebenezer Gelman. Bah, humbug. Hanukkah is a humbug. So let's go back over Rabbi Gelman's claims and see where Rabbi Gelman's right and where Rabbi Gelman's wrong. The Temple of Jerusalem was destroyed in 586 by the Babylonians and rebuilt 75 years later under the Persian government. In 331, Alexander the Great, a great Macedonian Greek king, conquers the whole world, the entire Mediterranean, and then he pushes into the east, into Afghanistan, all the way as far as North India. Wherever Alexander the Great went, it wasn't that he wanted to control this vast territory. He wanted to bring the treasures of his own culture, the treasures of Greek Hellenism, the treasures of Greek culture. And in fact, Greek culture had many treasures. And wherever he went, the peoples of the lands adopted all kinds of pieces and parts of Hellenism, of Greek culture. Greek became a language that you could speak in almost everywhere in the empire. There was the same currency, the same business law practiced across the empire. And more than that, some of the great ideas of Greek philosophy, of Greek governance, came to all of these different communities. And what happened rather quickly, actually, is that so many of the ancient cultures of the ancient Near East and the ancient and Afghanistan and farther in, those ancient cultures disappeared as the peoples of the land adopted these Greek ways, these Greek forms of life, and became part of this cosmopolitan culture called Hellenism. The question had to do in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, there was an argument. In Israel, there was an argument among Jews. There was an argument between those who wanted to give up all of the accoutrements of Jewish life that separated them from full participation in this Greek world, and those who said there are elements of this Greek culture which we can assimilate and take on, but we want to maintain our own distinctiveness as a Jewish community. That was the question. At the same time, when Alexander the Great died, his kingdom was divided. The European kingdom eventually became the Roman Empire. The Egyptian kingdom, Ptolemy's kingdom that was capitaled in Alexandria, and the Eastern kingdom, under a family called Seleucid, was capitaled in a town, today it's called Damascus, but then it was called Antioch. It was Antioch, and so the king who ruled there was Antiochus. And Antiochus wanted to bring together the 136 cultures and peoples that he ruled under one unified hegemony. And so we have a coincidence of two things at the same time. A class of Jews in Jerusalem who wish to give up the signs of their own distinction and adopt this cosmopolitan culture, and asked Antiochus for a statue of Zeus to install in the Temple of Jerusalem. And at the same time, Antiochus's desire to bring cultural uniformity to his people and to bring them all under the umbrella of Greek culture. So Antiochus confirms that request, concedes to it, brings the statue of Zeus first into the temple of Jerusalem, effectively making it a temple of Zeus instead of the god of Abraham, and then taking that statue around the countryside. And when it arrived in the town of Modin, which today is a giant suburb between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, but that back then was a small country town, there was a revolt that began on behalf of a country priest named Mattathias and his 5 sons. And here, Rabbi Gelman is right. It was a cultural war, and it was a cultural war that was first a civil war within the Jewish people. But then when Antiochus and his troops came in on the side of the assimilators, it became an international war. And the question was, how much of this Greek culture can we adopt without losing totally the culture of our ancestors, without losing the treasures of our own distinctiveness? That was the question. And Rabbi Gelman is right. The Maccabees were brutal, and today we would identify them as fundamentalists and as fascists. I thought he's not wrong about that, except that what they were defending was the distinctiveness of the Jewish people. And had they failed, the Bible would be lost to history. Had they failed, all of the East would become Hellenist. The Bible would never have become the core text of Western civilization alongside the Greek tradition. We never would have had the dialogue between the biblical ways of looking at humanity and the world and history and the Greek ways of looking, which is what generated Western civilization. It's what generated all of the gifts of Western civilization. I mean, the Maccabees protected that. Now, the Maccabees were not fundamentalists to the extent that they were Torah true Jews. They did not look like my Hasidic cousins. The Maccabees also identified with Greek culture, but they were much more selective in their assimilation. And so, as Rabbi Gelman is not wrong about many of his objections to the holiday, but I think the holiday does, in fact, raise a very interesting and in some ways ironic question, which is, we live in an American culture, which is every bit as attractive and as engaging as Hellenistic culture of that century. What in this American culture do we adopt, assimilate, and make our own? And what in this American culture do we push back? And what within our Jewish distinctiveness do we hold on to passionately because it's valuable to us? And what do we give up in order to become part of the American culture? You'll notice that the rabbi and I are both speaking English. So one can speak English and still be very loyal to the Jewish people. And we dress in Western fashions. At least I do. Rabbi dresses in his golf shirts, right? You can play golf and be a perfectly loyal.
That came from the Greeks.
Learned Jew.
Scottish, but they knew the Greeks.
Yeah, no, it's the truth, but you can still be very Jewish doing that. But are there parts of American civilization, parts of American culture and practice that, number one, as Jews, we reject, and number two, as moral people that we object? I asked my teenagers this, Mark. I asked my teenagers, is there something in American culture that you wish your little brothers and sisters did not see or did not get involved in? It's a very interesting question, because these teens are thoroughly American kids. I mean, they're wonderful, wonderful kids. But each of them had an answer. One of the kids said, you know, my little brother likes to hang out at the mall. My little sister likes to hang out at the mall. I worry about this consumer culture that they get involved. Another kid said, I worry about the violence that I see on television and in movies. Another kid said, I worry that my little sister is going to think that she has to always be made up and pretty, and the clothes she wears is a measure of her value. These are elements of American culture that these children already understand are not healthy for us. And that's the question that Hanukkah asks. What is it in the prevailing culture that is not sustainable morally, that is not healthy for us morally? And I think that's actually a very good question. And I think the holiday demands that we ask that question.
Okay, first of all, that's brilliant. I mean, that was really good. And there's a lot of people, when I make an argument as powerful as the one I think I can admit, as powerful and convincing as my argument, there are just a lot of people, Ed, who would just run away.
They've already turned off the broadcast. So
that's it.
Don't
what
worry
can
about
I say?
the people
It's
left are the
Gelman.
zealots.
How do I defeat Gelman? Okay. You're much better than all of them. But what I would like to call you out on, because I'm sure it was unintentional, is a slight slipping of the punch.
Okay, go ahead.
And that is the phrase, I tried to write it down, that the Maccabees were there to preserve the treasures of our own distinctiveness.
Yes.
I think that's a beautiful phrase. Unfortunately, it has nothing to do with Hanukkah. And here's the point. The treasures of our distinctiveness that the Maccabees wanted to revive was the slaughter of animals at a temple that was run by a priesthood that was inherited. Mm-hmm. And that was only inherited by men through the father's line, and that made Judaism a religion bound to a certain place, the temple, because it was Josiah's the one in 621 who relocated all the suburban temples to Jerusalem and to the worship in Jerusalem. But it was a temple that sacrificed animals through the agency of an inherited priesthood. There is nothing good about that. There is nothing sustainable about that. That is the Judaism that Josephus wrote about that was dying out by the first century. That was gone. And the reason that it was gone is basically that you had to have sovereignty over the temple, that the priests were corrupt, and that, as we all know, from looking at any monarchy on earth, anything that's inherited is bad.
All right, so I'm gonna ask our audience to indulge me for just a moment of technical Jewish history. First of all, I don't disagree with you on the religious point. I don't want to see a temple built in Jerusalem. I have no sense of spirituality from slaughtering animals and spritzing blood all over the place. Trust me. In that sense, I am a Pharisee or a rabbinic Jew.
Right.
100%. But you are messing up, dear teacher and friend. The Maccabees are in 165 BCE. The temple is destroyed in 70 CE. 235 years go by before we give up the temple. The Maccabees were not defending temple. Everybody defended temple. Look, 2/3 of the Mishnah is about the temple. Even the Pharisees revered the temple. The question wasn't temple or no temple. The question is, which God do you worship in that temple? The pagan Greeks and the assimilated Menelaus, the high priest of Jerusalem, brought a statue of Zeus that looked remarkably like Antiochus into the temple of Jerusalem and demanded that Jews bow to that statue and acknowledge Zeus as their god. The Maccabees, it was not a question of temple, yes, temple, no. It was a question of, do you worship the God of Abraham or do you worship the God of the Greeks? And the God of the Greeks was a political move because you were also worshiping the emperor. That's what the argument was about. Thank you for indulging my historical.
No, and it's an important intervention. And I will say, to show my spiritual generosity and largesse,
indeed,
I agree completely with what you just said. It's absolutely true.
A Hanukkah miracle has happened.
However,
oh, here it comes.
The fact remains that even at the time of the Revolt, there was a
nascent Pharisaic movement.
There was a nascent Pharisaic movement, and it had two loci. It had 2 points of focus where it was going on. One was the one that eventually in Israel bloomed, and that was in Yavne, right off of runway C3 in the airport today. And that was in Israel. But the main focus of this new Judaism, which became Judaism, not biblical Judaism with animal sacrifice, but rabbinic Judaism with everything Greek that was then washed through. The statue of Zeus did not make it through that filtering process. Thank you very much. It was right to oppose Avodah Zarah, which is idol worship. The Maccabees were right to oppose that, and I'm glad they won in that way. But the problem was, as soon as they won, their vision of Judaism, which wasn't just temple-oriented, that would have been bad enough, but it was corrupt temple-oriented.
Absolutely.
They sold the priesthood.
Yes.
They were completely dishonorable in every single way.
Yes, that's historical.
Right, and that provoked the even larger growth and the speedier growth of these, what they called scholars and scribes, who eventually called each other Rav.
The Pharisees, right, the rabbis.
And who were called by the Sadducees, the party of the temple, who were called Perushim, the ones who separated out, and they said it as a matter of insult, but we call them the Pharisees, and they call as a matter of compliment.
Well,
so,
let me
just say the other focus of this, because I was teaching Psalm 137 this week about the Babylonian exile, and you should read it. It helped soothe my soul, even though it was very, very agonizing. And that is the Tigris and Euphrates River Valley in present-day Iraq, and the Jewish centers there that began in 586 with the Babylonian captivity, and places like Sura and Pumbedita, where the Talmud, which we call the Babylonian Talmud, was written. And so what happened was that in 586 already, when the temple was there was already a majority of Jews who had to say to each other, look, we can't go back to offer sacrifices even 3 times a year for Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuos. There's no temple. It was destroyed by the Babylonians. So what are we going to do? And there's strong evidence now by many scholars, and Yechezkel Kaufman, one of the lead ones on this, that it was there in Babylonia, in exile, that non-Levites, proto-Pharisees, proto-rabbis, began to create the foundations of what we now know as Judaism.
Correct, yes.
Now, finally, I want to make the point that the people the Maccabees were killing, leaving aside the statue of Zeus, the people they were killing were primarily Jews who were open to Greek philosophy.
No, committed to Greek philosophy.
Yeah, I understand. So I want to, since I'm off way on a limb here tonight.
Come on, you got it.
And I'm perfectly willing to saw it off, not only to be on a limb, but to have a saw and saw it off behind me. I am willing to do that. I am willing now to defend Hellenized Jews,
okay.
Right? My argument is simple. There has never been a serious, inspiring, important stage of Jewish history and Judaism as a religion that did not take seriously, very seriously, what the world was learning about people and the world. Which is another way of saying the only important Judaisms were syncretistic Judaisms that assimilated the best that the world was discovering. In the case of the Greeks, Zeus on Olympus the people who don't know Greek philosophy, they get all confused here. They think, weren't they just the ones who worship Zeus and Nike, who made tennis shoes? No, they were the ones who also believed Plato and Aristotle and the Academy and the Pardes, the Plato's Academy. These were people who invented, in the case of Aristotle, all of the systematization of human thought. He invented biology. He invented ethics. He invented metaphysics. These were the greatest minds the world had ever produced. And their distinction between matter and form, just to take one example, totally transformed Judaism, which never had an idea of a soul, never taught that we had souls. We just have a nefesh, which is our life, and when you lose it, you're dead. That's what we had in the Bible, in the Tanakh. All of a sudden, we don't have a nefesh, we have a neshama. And that neshama is part of a duality with our guf, our body. So you have matter and form becoming guf and neshama. And that became the way out of the theological dead end that we see in the book of Job, and that we see in the Psalms, and that we see in lots of Jewish texts, where they didn't have what they needed most, which was a belief that death is not the end of us. What they did is they took from the Greeks and put it in Judaism, and Christianity took it from us. And then they ran with it and made it much more central to their religious life. And you and I have had that discussion many times, that I want it recovered, I want it returned, I want it revived in Jewish teaching. So the fact of the matter is that Hellenism was by and large a good thing, just as assimilating into modern culture in our time is basically a good thing. And I know that's hard with social media being so corrupt, and I know it's hard with all the pornography that comes through there, and I know that it's hard with all of the commercialism and the degrading of women. There's so much bad in the culture that we live in, but the possibility for equal treatment for men and women, for gays and straights, for people who were completely oppressed with no future and no hope in the past and history, is so much more open today. And I gladly walk around, without a yarmulke on all the time. Whenever I teach, I have a yarmulke because I may mention the name of God. But I'm happy to be assimilated into American culture. I'm happy, for example, to follow sports, as you do. I'm happy that I play sports. I'm happy that I read American writers and poets. I mean, I don't know an Orthodox Jew who reads Mary Oliver's poetry, and I think you can't be a fully joyous human being without reading her poetry. So I want to say a word
we don't disagree about that.
No,
but look, like everything in life, it's a question of the degree, right? Ice cream is good, penicillin is good. It's a question of how much you eat, right? And the question of the Maccabees wasn't assimilate or not assimilate. You're exactly right. Judaism gained a tremendous amount. First by its connection with, its conversation with Hellenistic culture, with conversation with Canaanite culture, conversation with Mesopotamian and Egyptian culture, and then later on, conversation with Arabic Muslim culture, conversation with European culture. Now you can see my books are behind me. This is my office, my study. Half of these books are Jewish books, represent the treasures of Jewish wisdom. And on the other side of the office, which you can't see, are all my secular books, my philosophy books, and my education books. And they talk to each other. They have to. We have always been a people open to the outside, in conversation with culture, in conversation with the ideas and forms and practices of the peoples among whom we've lived. That's not the question. The question is how much? And at what point have you assimilated so much that it becomes toxic? That's the biggest question.
Okay, let's drill down on that.
Well, hang on. So that was the question of the Maccabees. That was the cultural war. And you're right. That was the cultural war of the Maccabees. That's what was most important about it. And here, I want to take one more step because it's Shabbos Hanukkah. There's a Haftorah read today, and that Haftorah is
Zechariah
from the prophet Zechariah. It's a prophet of the Second Temple. That is the community that came back from Babylon and rebuilt the temple, and we're having a very hard time of it. And when the priest Zerubbabel complains to the prophet that it's going so badly, because he'd been raised in exile on fantasies of what this temple looked like. And when he started building the thing, it didn't resemble any of the fantasies or dreams. And he complained. And the prophet says to the priest, Lo b'chayil b'lo b'koach im beruchi amar Adonai, not by might and not by power. We know those words because our dear friend Debbie Friedman made a song out of it. But think of what the rabbis did when they made that the Haftorah for Shabbos Hanukkah. What they said was, it's not the war. It's not the war. That's not the way Jews are going to survive in this world, through military might. Yes, right now there's a war going on in Israel, and we pray that it comes to a successful resolution and Hamas is uprooted. But we're not going to survive that way. We're going to survive by holding on to the treasures of our peoplehood, the treasures of our culture, the deepest ideas and visions and power of hope that belongs to this people. And that's what's represented in the menorah. It's the rabbis who gave us the legend of the oil, that the Maccabees found only one cruse, one jar of oil in the temple, and it lasted 8 nights. It was a metaphor. That was a metaphor. That one bit of Torah, one bit of the distinctiveness of this people and its brilliance is what it takes to relight a world sunk in ignorance and darkness and paganism and cruelty. And most of all, it takes just a drop of hope to dispel a great deal of despair. And in that sense, I think this is a very critical holiday for this moment, when so many of us are watching the world about us, shaking our heads, wondering what is going on.
I agree. All right. If you want to dig down and say that the question is not whether we should assimilate, but how much should we assimilate?
And what should we assimilate?
And I'm willing to go down into the weeds with you, but it's not going to be pretty on your side, because this isn't a theoretical question. This isn't how much in general should we accept. How do you even answer that question? It comes down to specifics. And I'll give you some that are tough. And you've made courageous decisions in your lifestyle. And I just want everyone to understand that I admire them, but I don't agree with them. One is, I can go to any restaurant in this country with a friend, and I can have dinner with them. And I can order anything on the menu if I want. And I feel a tremendous sense of empowerment and freedom to be able to go to, and I'm not talking about we invite them to a restaurant. I usually would not choose a restaurant with morally compromising food or non-kosher food. But all restaurants other than kosher restaurants are a challenge. And you have accepted kashrut and its limitations. I think the limitations of kashrut are not spiritually defensible because of the high price of kosher food, because vegetarianism is essentially a superior diet, for a lot of reasons. But I think restaurants have replaced so much in our culture of how you get together with people, how you socialize with people, and I think it's good that we can assimilate that way. The yarmulke on the street, head covering. I'm happy not to wear a yarmulke on the street, and now it's actually a way of being safe, not wearing a yarmulke on the street. I'm sad to say that, but and my cardiologist, who's an Orthodox Jew, says, I'm getting a bigger chai and I'm getting a bigger yarmulke because I want to say, here I am. And well, okay, that's one way to see it. But my point is that looking the way other people look, speaking the way they speak, going to the schools they go to, these create connections. These create friendships. My friendship with Father Tom Hartman was the result of assimilation.
Okay.
Without assimilation into American culture, I could have never been the friend of a priest. And he could have never been the friend of a rabbi. And I'm willing to defend that. Finally, I would say there is not a whole lot positive in Orthodox Judaism about feminism. I know this is a big question, and my friends Blue Greenberg and Yitz, they are wonderful spokespeople for a traditional Jewish life. But the recent attempt to ordain women in the Orthodox movement that failed and will continue to fail gives me a renewed sense that this is also an assimilation that I think is a good assimilation, that we have absorbed the feminist ideal, that my daughter, Mara, my wife, Betty, my granddaughter, Daisy, should have the same spiritual horizons as my son, Max. And
I don't disagree with you on any of these.
That's how I would go down into the week.
My kashrut is more, in some ways, does separate me from other people more than yours does.
Yes, it
does.
But
both of us have standards of what we eat and what we don't eat, right? And those standards separate us from somebody. And I don't feel totally alienated from my non-Jewish community because I can go into a restaurant, pretty much anyone. There are some ethnic restaurants that are a little harder to get through, and find something vegetarian on the menu that I can enjoy. Now, I happen to live in California, which makes that easier. When I lived in Texas, it was harder, no question. But, it's a question of moderation, question of how much. And I do find spiritual meaning in my kashrus. And what I do, and I do wear a kippah in the synagogue and when I'm teaching, and when I'm outside, I wear my baseball cap. And frankly, these days, it's dangerous to wear kippah outside a lot.
Yes, it is.
And I agree with you on feminism 100%. I think it's one of the great gifts that we have assimilated from outside. And it's a beautiful gift to the Jewish people because it's empowered half of our population, more than half, to become full leaders and participants in the conversation of the formation of the Jewish spirit, and made us men even more sensitive to parts of ourselves and to others about us. I agree with you. All of these
So
things.
Where do you draw the line, Ed?
But I do draw lines. I mean, I do.
But how? I know you draw lines. How?
You draw a line, first of all, where there are spiritual gifts that may be contrary to the culture outside, but I'm going to push back against the culture outside because I love these spiritual gifts. I keep Shabbat, and I have lost all sorts of opportunities because I keep Shabbat. I got friends with really good football tickets who wanted me to come and see a game. Couldn't do it. It's on Shabbos, right? I have lots of social engagements. Listen, I'm so jealous sometimes of friends who can go out on a Friday night. But on the other hand, they're jealous of me that my family gathers around a table, around candles and challah, and we bless each other. We make accommodations, and we bring in from the outside culture what's healthy. But we also make choices. You too, Mark. You make choices.
I do.
About things on the outside. Right. You've given up a lot, number one, because you're a moral, sensitive, spiritually sensitive, and deeply wise human being. And you've given up a lot because you're a Jew. And you say, that's not a Jewish way of doing things. We all do that. That's the question of Hanukkah. That's the question. Where along the spectrum of between the extremes of assimilation and isolation, where in that middle ground do we find a place of fruitful comfort? And it's a dynamic. It's always changing and moving. It's always changing. Interesting question right now in my neighborhood, which you'll appreciate. There's some families in my neighborhood that are putting up Hanukkah decorations on their homes, Hanukkah lights,
Yeah, yeah.
displays. And one point, my first response was, "Oh, they're just imitating Christmas." On the other hand, if they wanted to imitate Christmas, they put up Christmas lights. They put up a tree. What they're doing is asserting their Jewishness, but they're asserting their Jewishness in an American way. Maybe that's not so bad. This is where we are. We have come to a moment we have to finish. Mark, we have an important spiritual question to ask. So gift giving has become part of the American Hanukkah celebration. I know. Help us give gifts that matter. Help us give gifts that are spiritually appropriate.
Okay, I'll go, then you go. Here's a list that you should maybe consider of what is a spiritually acceptable Hanukkah gift. First standard is, just because someone wants it doesn't make it spiritually acceptable. I had a friend who would not buy any Hanukkah gift for their kids that was advertised on television because he didn't want them to become susceptible to that. I believe spiritually acceptable gifts include gifts that cause you to read. I believe, in other words, books of any kind. I believe that social media in all its forms is not good, but there are video games that are terrible, the kind that you blow somebody up into a zillion pieces, and the other kind where you solve a mystery. And the mystery ones are okay, the blowing people up into 1,000 pieces are not. I think jewelry is acceptable because it's a lovely gift, but Jewish jewelry is even better. Giving someone a Mogen David or a mezuzah or something, even though wearing it outside may be dangerous, you could put it under a shirt, whatever. I think that also is a good thing. I think family games are spiritually acceptable because you have to play them together. I think creative building blocks for little kids, where you build buildings or
Legos.
Well, or Lincoln Logs or whatever. They're good. I think I'm an old fan of railway electric trains.
No,
because I'm an old guy and I like that stuff. And I think living things are problematic because you can't say to someone, "I'm giving you fish or a dog," unless the person says, "I'm willing to take care of it." So I don't think those should be gifts. Those are negotiations in which a child promises to be a good steward of the gift and you agree to give it to them. And those are some of my spiritually acceptable Hanukkah gifts.
That's a beautiful idea. That's just a beautiful way to think about it. Spiritually acceptable Hanukkah gifts.
What's on your list?
Well, I'll just add a practice that we had. This is a practice that Nina and I stumbled across. It was complete accidents. We have kids. We have 3 kids, and they all have ideas about what they want, right? And the circular comes from Toys R Us. There's my son at the table circling what he wants. I said to him, "What are you doing?" He said, "I want to make sure Grandma gets it right." So we started this custom where the first night of Hanukkah, you get the big gift, the big toy, the big whatever it is. The second night of Hanukkah, we take a toy to one of the toy drives and we give. The third night of Hanukkah, you get a book. The fourth night of Hanukkah, we give away books that we're not reading anymore to the library or to a school that needs books. You alternate getting nights with giving nights.
Beautiful.
Right? We gave the kids toys. When my son wasn't playing with his Legos anymore, we took a box of them over to the shelter. So there's a domestic violence shelter here in the valley. You can't actually get to the shelter, but you can get to the office, and we gave it to them and explained to the kid that this is for a kid who can't be with their family because terrible things have happened in their family. We gave food to the food bank. We gave clothes to the shelter. We alternate giving nights and getting nights. And therefore, the kids understood the joy of both. And if you ask my kids to this day what they really remember, they'll tell you how much they remember the giving nights more than the getting nights. Because the idea that we went to the shelter and saw families that looked just like us, but didn't have a place to live. And we were able to give toys and books and clothes and blankets. And the kids felt we helped somebody else's holiday. That's a beautiful way to do it. Mark, I know this is not your favorite holiday, but on behalf of all of us who love you, we all want to wish you a happy Hanukkah, and may the dreidel fall on the on the gimel, and you get everything that life is coming to you. Take good care. Have a good Shabbos and a happy
Thank
Hanukkah.
you. Happy Hanukkah, everyone.